Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. At Mint Mobile, we like to do the opposite of what Big Wireless does. They charge you a lot, we charge you a little. So naturally, when they announced they'd be raising their prices due to inflation, we decided to deflate our prices due to not hating you. That's right. We're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month slows. Full terms at mintmobile.com.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. From the launch your online shop stage, all the way to the we just hit 1 million orders stage. No matter what stage you're in, Shopify's there to help you grow. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/special offer, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/special offer.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to YAOK. I am Eric J. Brown, and I'm here with my wonderful co-host. Say hi, Alyssa.
Hi, Alyssa. It was a good dad joke, right?
I was waiting for you to do that one.
How are we doing today?
I am great. How are you?
I'm great. We had such a great conversation with our author today.
Yes, we're talking with Quinn Diacon-Furtado. Quinn is the author of the YA book, the Barnes & Noble YA book club pick, The Lilies. And we talk about everything from just dark academia to time loops and generational trauma. It's really,
it's like,
really well-rounded.
It actually did feel light in conversation, but I guess the topics seem a little bit heavier than that. But I really enjoyed talking to them because they also were an English teacher in the past. Yeah. And I feel like that's been one of the fun parts of having conversations with YA authors is that their audience would be like hypothetically maybe in some school. Or they could be, or they would be much more recently out of like high school than like we are. So yeah. I kind of like that, so I like that conversation because I think it's interesting to read these books and learn about authors' perspectives, writing for like young adults who would be required reading otherwise, and you're giving them something like joyful and fun to read instead. And I just I love that conversation, and I want to keep having it.
We kind of get a little bit in the weeds at some part about just the kind of process of writing. And like Quinn's process is very different from a lot of other authors. I think we didn't really touch on it in the episode, but they did it very differently. So if you are an aspiring author, just know that Quinn is the exception, not the rule. Yeah. They had really good contacts that immediately, I mean, it's, you know what? We don't need to talk that much about it. Let's let the audience just listen because
let them discover it.
A really great episode. So
it is.
For 5 long years, our lives like magnetic fields. You are my universe. You are my universe, and I'm just a planet.
And now we can jump into talking familial trauma with the Lilies.
Just like light fare,
Yeah, exactly.
Quinn, how are you? It's good to see you again.
Good to see you again. I'm good. We're going through like a little mini heat wave here in upstate New York, but of course, like it's like nothing. I used to live in Louisiana, so it's 80, it's like 85, and everyone's like, I'm dying, and I'm like, this is fine. This is October in Louisiana.
This is when I am absolutely the weakest link is in this weather because I am just not. I am the person complaining. I'm the one telling you that I'm sweating and I hate it. And this is like my version of like when there's a snowstorm outside and everyone's like inclement weather, everyone stay inside. This is my inclement weather. I
hear you.
I mean, it's nice. The thing about summer is it's nice when you can be by a pool, by the beach. Like if I'm by a body of water and the only thing I'm doing that day is like enjoying the heat, that's so different to me. That is not what I'm doing today. I had to drive to Staples. I thought I was going to pass out on the way there. It's terrible.
I'm always an indoor cat, so it's nothing new for me.
An indoor cat.
I'm lucky. I just replaced my AC on the third floor of my house, which is where I am right now. It used to just be like really hot up here.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's just, I'm kind of like, oh, it's a little chilly just because my AC is just blasting. And then I'll get like the first electric bill this month and I'll be like,
Cry.
oh, I need to turn that off.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I'll just go
cry.
back to being hot upstairs.
You're what's that thing about a bill that you can't cash?
Writing a check
you can't cash. That's the one.
And we can't remember it because who writes checks anymore?
And because I don't have money to write.
Everything's
I don't have money to write checks anyway. So
that too.
Anyways, Quinn, we're so happy to have you here. I am so excited. I've literally never added a book so quickly to my Kindle as I did for the Lilies.
Alyssa, when I first read about like what this book was about, I was like, oh, Alyssa's gonna love this.
Yeah, I do.
This is I think it crosses off like almost every box that you look for in a book, pretty much.
Amazing. I'm so happy to hear
Yes.
that. So what
Yes.
is like drawing you to it? I want to know, like, what is your brand?
The dark academia vibes
Mhm.
is very up my alley. A little bit of magical something, also very up my alley. A mystery, you've sold me. And the cover is also really beautiful. Like just all of it. Like the little like wax seal on the front really just scratches an itch for me. All of those things are like a perfect combination of what I would want in a book, and I can't wait to read it.
That's fabulous.
So Quinn, give our listeners who may not know about the Lilies, give them like a quick pitch about what the book's about.
So Lilies, multi-point of view, thriller, mystery, suspense. It follows 4 students at Archwell Academy, which is an all-girls prep school. Spoiler alert, all the students that the story follows are not girls. It's a queer thriller in which the 4 students get trapped in a closet during a school lockdown drill, and eventually emerge and find that they've entered a time loop. And that time loop is tied back to the worst memories that they all have that are all linked back to the same day. So in trying to keep their secrets from each other while they're trapped in this time loop, there's just a lot of like backstabbing, subverting, and repeating of familial trauma and like past histories as they're trying to sort of break out of it. The time loop is slowly disintegrating, and so they need to. There's essentially a ticking clock. They need to break out before it just completely unravels. So it's been a fun one because it's 4 different narrators. I think there's something really there for everybody to connect to, especially since like the perspectives are so different from one another. And while that was very challenging to write, I think it's fun to read too. I had fun writing it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I love like multi POV stuff. I honestly prefer multi POV to just like a one person's point of view. I know some stories can only be told by one person, but I love like really, especially like this is something that it has a hook. It's a high concept. So I like seeing the way there's like, when there's a high concept idea, the way different people are reacting to it. And I think that's with thrillers, mysteries, horror. I think that's always really interesting to see how different points of view are taking things in. And then you can also put little fun plot twists, especially if they're like one of the character has something to do with what's going on. Then you're like kind of figuring things out that way. Yeah. I just love multi-POV stuff. Yeah. I'm always there for that.
Yeah, it was really interesting mapping out who was going to hold on to what clue throughout the arc of the narrative, because, you know, because the 4 narrators have such different perspectives, they pick up on very different things. And so the reader is kind of a step ahead of each one of them individually and able to collect all of the clues while they can't necessarily see the whole picture. And for that reason, it's fun. It was almost like, you ever do a French braid and it's like, okay, over, under. Over.
Yeah.
That's what the outlining process was like. Cause it's just like, all right, trying to keep everybody's not just voice ironed out, but perspective and like array of knowledge. I love multi-point of view mysteries in particular too, for that same reason. Just like, it just really lends itself to sort of the psychology of it all. So yeah.
And I think there's opportunity with multi-point of view to also, like, one of the things that as I've gotten older, I think has been like a big lesson for me, like in just like my personal goings about, is the difference between what's actually happening and how we're experiencing it, and like the story that we tell ourselves versus like what's actually happening. And when you're doing multi-POV, I feel like you have the opportunity to distinguish a little bit of that, because it's like what this person is experiencing of the same event that another person is going to explain and experience in a completely different way. And I think that's really interesting. And I feel like multi-POV in general, those are the books where I fly through them, because I'm like, well, now I have to know what this person is going to say about this. And it just makes these, like, it makes a book so easy to like devour. Although I would imagine that outlining something like that would be really challenging. And we talk about outlining a lot on this show, because I always have to make fun about how Eric is like really chaotic when I'm not a writer. So like, to me, that's like the tallest mountain to climb, is to write a book. And I am like amazed that you guys all do it to the degree that you do, because I don't think could do it. Not well. And Eric does it in a way that is just like absolute chaos throwing to the wind. And so I would imagine that your process would be extremely different.
Oh, well, I mean, we kind of talked about this a little bit when we first met, Eric, where you're very much like a Cancer and I am like the super Virgo plotter with my scary spreadsheet, put my entire head in the computer. And I think like, yeah, I mean, but it's all just throwing spaghetti at the wall. Whatever sticks is going to stick. So it's just however you want to get there is how you get there. I have trouble remembering details. And so I have to like keep all of that straight, because in the end, I have to keep all of it straight in a separate document or on paper, because in the end, when I'm going through with a fine tooth comb, I'm trying to make my revision process less exhausting. I don't like reading on the computer. I like reading on paper, and I'm not printing out every single draft, so when I'm revising, I have to go in with a really clear picture of like, surgical, like, okay, I'm in this particular chapter for this particular thing. And it's not like I don't read the whole thing many times, but I, as somebody with a different brain, I just really need to put into place like the systems that allow me to like actually revise adequately. And I feel very lucky that we live in a time where I can do that all on like one machine. I did a research fellowship recently where I was looking at manuscripts in like an archive that were sort of like original outlines for books that were published in like the 60s and 70s. And like the amount of paperwork that people had to go through, the amount of documentation, it's like unreal. And so, and I was the kid with like the scrunched up paper at the bottom of my book sack. So like, if I lived in that time, I would not be a novelist, so I'm very grateful for computers. But Eric, you just go for it. You just sit down and do page by page, and that's how you nail it.
I mean, here's the deal. And now I have to write outlines, because before I even start writing something, I have to get my publisher to approve it. So it's funny, you were talking about how, you have to concisely know what your revision is going to entail. And I literally just spent the last month trying to figure out where to even start on this revision that I have written an outline in, by the way. And it's just the outline I wrote and what I ended up putting on the paper. And while I'm writing it, looking at the outline, remembering the things that I'm going to be doing, and then making it real, it changed some things, because I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't make sense on paper unless I kind of add these new scenes in. And then those scenes kind of slow down the like kind of the momentum of the story, especially for a thriller. And so I have to figure out ways to change that, and I have to heighten things. And so for the past month, I was like, I know that this is like, Quinn, when you're revising, are there drafts where you're kind of going through and you're like, okay, I'm just kind of fixing these issues right now. And then there's another draft where you realize, okay, if I fix this one thing, all of this changes and I know it's going to be a better book,
right,
but I have to do all of that.
right.
That's where I am in this draft, which is good that this is a second draft, not like a fourth draft, but I know it's going to be one of those things where my deadline is July 8th and I am either going to make it by that much or I'm going to have to ask for an extension. And I don't like doing it, but I know deadlines are made up. If you're listening and you want to be a writer and you're concerned about meeting deadlines, they're not real.
They're totally not. And every time I hit a deadline, people are like, "Oh, amazing!" And I'm like, "Yeah."
They're like floored,
right? Yeah,
like this never happens.
They're shocked that I have made the deadline, and then I'm like, "Wait, I could have had like 2 extra weeks of doing this."
I've been there,
and the answer is yes.
I've been there before, though, Eric, where it's like you're like, "Oh, okay, if I just shift this one thing." But then it's like pulling out the wrong thread on your sock and then the sock falls apart. And so that can be, if it is in service of a better book, then it's worth doing it every time. Sometimes it's better to do like a gut job of like midpoint act 2 through the end of act 3 than it is to just kind of try to piece it back together as is, like there were several times with Lilies where I was like, okay, this chapter is written from this person's point of view. It is not working. I have to go and change like who is narrating. And so that means everything about it has to change. Like the actual, some of the events will stay the same because a lot of the time the 4 students are like in the same space as each other, but sometimes they're not. And so, what they're witnessing changes, but also there's this element of like the voice is going to need to change. The, way that things are described is just going to be vastly different. And so instead of just like, oh yeah, it's a quick fix, you end up rewriting complete sections of the novel. And so, once I did that like a couple of times, I was like, all right, let me make sure my outline is the wildest, most tricked out thing that I've done up until this point, because otherwise like I'm just dead in the water, just revising and revising again. I do find that I revise faster though than I draft. Do you tend to draft faster or revise faster?
I draft faster. I'm a really quick writer, but it's because I'm kind of telling myself the story. And so I'm like excited to see where it goes. Mm-hmm. Even with an outline, I'm still kind of telling myself the story. But I guess I could be a fast reviser because it's for me, it's the revision. If they give me like a month and a half to do the revision, a month of that is going to be me staring at the wall and procrastinating while I'm trying to figure out how to fix it. Because that's always the question is like, okay, well, you say I have to do this. And it's like, how do I do that though? And I know the answer is always to rewrite sections that are not working, but it just seems so daunting. And it's one of the kill your darlings things where I just, in my heart, I'm like, oh, I'm really sad to see this. Like I'm cutting out this really exciting plot point in this thriller because I'm like, it's going to slow it down and it's not worth it. And I can create something more exciting, but I have to get rid of like 5 chapters worth of stuff. And I'm like, it's daunting to have to rewrite that, but I'm also kind of looking forward to see what it looks like when it is done.
Yeah.
And then maybe saving that for later too.
I tend to have the opposite issue where it's like, you're talking about like cutting big things for pacing reasons. And sometimes I have an issue where it's like, okay, we're paced and let's pause and have a little dialogue just to make sure we all understand what's going on. Like
let's get everyone on the same page.
Exactly. Especially it's like, they're 4 teenagers, like not everybody is like keeping super, super close track. Some of the characters are like more tuned in and others are not. Right. And that's just life and different brains, spicy brains. And so having these like in Lilies, because they keep coming back to the closet every time the time loop like resets and starts to disintegrate, they have these sort of interstitial moments where they can come together. Like the 4 characters can come together and talk about what just happened. And I found that really helpful as like a device, because when I was writing and finding like, okay, I know what's going on as the puppet master here, but I need to make sure that not just all these characters are getting up to speed with each other, but the reader has an opportunity to take a beat and like fully absorb because not everyone's going to pick up on the same things. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also feel like that is probably even helpful. Like if you're dealing with multiple storylines, them coming together and having that conversation also helps to be like, okay, cool. We're all on the same page. Like as the writer, I would imagine that to be helpful so that, everyone has the same information moving into like whatever the next plot point is versus like, am I spilling a secret that they shouldn't all know already?
Right.
That would make me so nervous.
Or you see them lying to each other, knowing that, okay, I just watched Blythe do this in her memory, and now I'm going back to the closet. I'm watching how Blythe is responding to Rory. Or I'm like hearing what Rory is saying when she's directly narrating, but that's not how she's talking to these other 4 people. And so like, again, another reason why the outline had to be so tight, because otherwise it's like, a character could come out with something in dialogue. Because when you're drafting, you're like, okay, this is how it sounds. And like you have all that information in your head and like in front of you. But it's important that the character, especially with a mystery, like the characters are not all constantly on the same page and like all constantly sort of on pace with what's happening. Otherwise, you lose the suspense, you lose the pace of it.
Right.
Absolutely.
Are there any characters that you had more fun writing their perspectives of than others?
That's a great question. So there are 4 characters. There's Rory, who is the daughter of the Chancellor and sort of the Regina George of the bunch.
Also, I feel like Rory gives like Rory Gilmore, and that's the first person that I think of, and like overachiever.
Yes.
Honestly, kind of annoying.
Yes.
I feel like that sets in with a Rory.
1,000%. And like, I don't have this information, but she's probably a Scorpio. So, she's just really like, she's coming for you. Then there's Blythe, who is Rory's secret society sister in the Lilies. They are both members of the Lilies Society. And essentially they are locked in competition with each other for both the top academic spot and also sort of jockeying for low-key control of this secret society. But Blythe is kind of on the outs because in comparison to like other girls within that society, because she is not a legacy student in the way that the other students are. Her grandmother was like actually a servant at Archwell Academy in the 50s because she's African-American, and they did not allow African-American students back in the day. And so Blythe's like very aware of that, and that impacts, how she experiences things and what her perspective is like. Then you have Drew. Drew is a legacy student, just got into Archwell Academy through like family connections. They're non-binary and they're coming in as a transfer student as a senior. And so they are in this like tough spot. Yeah, because they are feeling very much like a fish out of water, but still pretty confident in who they are in themselves. And they're used to being accepted, and they're in a place where they're not. They expect to get invited to the Lily Society and they don't get invited. And there's like a little chip on their shoulder about that. And then finally, there's Vero, who's sort of like the school's Banksy, like outsider artist, creating anonymous installations about all of sort of the injustices at Archwell Academy. But she's not thinking about all of the aspects of, who could be getting hurt in the subject matter. And so she's one of these people who like, she will act before she thinks. And so as with every character, there's a little bit of me in each one of them. I think the ones that are most fun to write are the ones who how to say this? The ones who I find most fun or like easiest in the drafting part are the ones who have like a life experience that feels like similar to mine. So it was like very, very easy to write Drew for me because that very much aligns with my experience attending a women's college for grad school, attending prep school in DC, being a person who like didn't necessarily fit within the gender binary, felt really uncomfortable in those spaces. But that doesn't like, it's easier to draft Drew's chapters, but that doesn't necessarily make it fun.
Right.
It's more fun to draft like Vero, who's like, in her mind is like right about everything. And like, I like to get on my high horse too. So I'm sort of like, yes, like, let me write this down from this person's perspective. And I find that really fun. The revision of it sometimes can be harder because it's like, oh, I don't want to cut this. Sometimes it's hard to write Rory. It was hard to write Rory because she's so petty. And like, it's not really my MO. But obviously, like, you have to be a little petty if you're going to write petty characters. So.
Right. I could just imagine you writing it and like it's coming from your brain and at the same time being like, damn, Rory, chill out, and continuing to write this.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
I always find it hard to write characters that are like characters that are supposed to be the antagonist, but they have to be like really not evil, but like just below that like really evil threshold where they're supposed to be realistic. Because even though I know I'm writing these characters that are saying awful things or doing awful things, it doesn't feel realistic to me because I'm like, nobody would ever do this. But it's like, even when I'm pulling from real people, there was my first book, I tried to pull from Republicans, basically Republican senators. And I tried to pull specific things that they said for some of these characters because it was like, I went in and I would like search some of the things that I already typed and try and like pair it with somebody who's already in the Senate or something. And a lot of times when they will say these things that just seem so dehumanizing and it happens so often that I forget. And it's like my subconscious has picked it up and saved it and been like, oh, this has been said by people like this before. And so when I go to compare notes, I'm like, oh, I guess this is kind of realistic. But it's just that initial writing it feels so fake because it's like nobody would ever actually say this. And then you find out, oh no, it has been said. And that's why it's in your head because it just didn't come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
It hits different when you see it written out too. And I think like sometimes when people are making statements like that, like because it's embedded in all of this extra rhetoric, like it doesn't always register in the same way, you know, unless you get it just down to the soundbite. But then when you see it written, it's like, oh my God. And so in the same way with characters, it's like, it's important to still try to like, you have to try to make them whole people, even if they are antagonists. Yeah. And so I think that is something that's hard for me when it's like, oh, I am really not enjoying what this person is doing in my story, but like they need to do it. And I need to think of a reason why they did it. And that's what led me down the road of like, okay, I'm going to start writing like about generational trauma and like how that shows up in people's behavior, just day-to-day behavior and like sort of the day-to-day trauma of life that we're all just kind of walking around with all the time. Because, you know, in this way, to me, this is what makes Lilies a little bit different than your average thriller mystery because it is very much psychological. It is very much about, it's not the stabby murder trauma. It is like the, oh my God, I can't believe this person said this to me. And oh my God, I can't believe like, I can't believe what I did in this scenario in response to that. And so with that sort of thing in mind, when you think of a character backstory to sort of like contextualize why they're doing these horrible things, it kind of makes it a little bit easier for me to like write them doing the horrible things. Now, with that said, I don't think you should do that for your like horrible homophobic Republican characters, you know, but I do understand.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. At Mint Mobile, we like to do the opposite of what Big Wireless does. They charge you a lot. We charge you a little. So naturally, when they announced they'd be raising their prices due to inflation, we decided to deflate our prices due to not hating you. That's right. We're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month slows. Full terms at mintmobile.com.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. From the launch your online shop stage, all the way to the we just hit 1 million orders stage. No matter what stage you're in, Shopify's there to help you grow. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/special offer, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/special offer.
Hey, Do you have an idea for a podcast but don't know where to start? Or do you have an already existing podcast that you want to take to the next level? Well, check out WeKnowPodcasting.com. From concept development to theme music to editing to logos, WeKnowPodcasting.com is a one-stop shop for all things pod. Don't hesitate to hit us up. We're very nice.
That is one of the things that I think is so intriguing about this book is just the fact that it's a time loop, but it's also dealing with generational trauma and specifically the history of Archwell Academy too. So it's like you're not just doing the Groundhog Day or Happy Death Day where it's this one character that is learning about themselves. It's this time loop is representative of a whole bigger issue at play. And I think that's what makes this stand out so interesting. Was that something that you picked up from the beginning where as soon as you decided to have a time loop that you were like, okay, and this is what it's going to unpack? Or was this something that while you were outlining or writing, that you kind of discovered?
It was something that sort of unfolded with some help and conversation with my editor, because we were trying to think of okay, what makes this time loop open beyond the fact that this school is just hallowed ground in the way that Edinburgh or New Orleans is just one of those places that's very atmospheric, very sort of dark academia, for lack of a better term. And, but it felt like there needed to be a plot reason for why the time loop opened in the first place. And so, without spoiling anything, that reason for the time loop opening is related back to the original Lilies, the original members of the secret society that is pulling the strings at Archwell Academy. Thinking about, what it would have been like to be a student at an all-women's school in the 1950s, thinking about what it would be like to be a student in that type of environment that's designed to be cloistered, exclusionary, purposefully, quote unquote, protecting women.
Yeah, heavy quotes.
Yes, protecting women from the ills of the world, when it's really about it's really about patriarchy. It's really about reinforcing patriarchy. It's really about reinforcing a very specific type of white feminism, where it's we're going to keep our upper class white women in their own separate zone. And we're going to make that about then we're going to sell that as empowerment, but it's really just reinforcing all these really poo systems that we have. So that is in the back of my mind throughout the whole drafting process. And while it does come up thematically throughout the book, it's it's way more about the mystery and the experience that the experiences that these characters had that opened this time loop in the first place. But it's all informed by those bigger structural things, which I think is interestingly similar to your dystopian series, Eric, because everything that happens to your narrators would not be happening if these bigger structural things were not at play. Yeah. If we had better healthcare systems, for example, or even I just think about the gun use in the books, and it's the availability of weapons, even post-apocalypse, is quite rife. So it's just really interesting to think about how these things impact our fictional worlds too, as much as they impact our real worlds.
Yeah, and the other thing with All That's Left in the World, I that the way society kind of crumbles and how those structures leave all of this afterwards, being able to find guns and still right-wing extremism, totalitarianism. But then I knew that was going to be something that was going to be a main theme of the book. And while I was writing it, I specifically wanted to focus on Jamie, because without all of these structures, he actually has the freedom to explore his sexuality in a way that he didn't have before with society there. And his family, his friends, they aren't there. So he doesn't have to worry about that external judgment. He can recognize this feeling, sit with it, and then kind of explore it on his own without being worried about what happens. So I just kind of wanted to do that, weird kind of dichotomy, I guess. between the two things.
I love that. When we talk about like speculative futures, possible futures, I think sometimes people get a little bit spooked when we use like words like dystopian, right? It's almost kind of a misnomer because while all of the bad things that are happening like in your world are carrying over, there's all this possibility for reinvention. Like when they make it to South Florida and like the way like food is being grown and like the houses are, I'm like, okay, yeah, like this could work. And like, I think it's up to people who write fiction. It's up to every type of artist really to like envision, what is possible? Like, what is the silver lining? What is exciting about the future? And so, yeah, I mean, Lilies is about revisiting the past in order to re-envision the future. And again, no spoilers, but like, it's I've been told that people are like, oh, I felt hopeful about the future when this ended. I was like, oh, thank you so much for saying that. I was worried that people were going to be traumatized from reading this. So, yeah.
I feel like that's part of what makes specifically YA fiction stand out so much. And I think why a lot of adults are reading YA is because we as adults, we kind of see how bad the world can get. We have kind of gotten all of that. And YA always has that hope there, even though it's dark stuff, it always has that hopeful ending. And I'm sure there's plenty, now that I've like said that, I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people that are like, well, what about this book that doesn't have a hopeful ending at all? And I'm like, well, yeah, there is that book, but for the most part. And I like that our dark stories can have happy endings or hopeful endings. I would say hopeful endings.
We were talking recently about summer reading lists and the books that we read in school. And there's so many books that we read in school that I guess like as an adult, when I take a step back, I understand what tool they were trying to demonstrate by giving us these books. And the only times that I really felt like that was effective for me was, I guess, like 1984 and maybe like Animal Farm, those books. Aside from that, like, I don't know what Holden Caulfield was supposed to teach me, I'll be honest. And I feel like having young adult books be able to do that, actually be able to teach real lessons, like using the past as like reevaluating the past to help project a better future, or taking this really shit situation, but showing a projection of maybe what the future could look like if we, make some changes, using like having these books that would hopefully be something that someone would pick up outside of their school curriculum as a young adult and still be able to be like entertaining and fun and page turners and still like have them walk away with hopefully some sense of like, okay, I actually feel like I learned something. I wish that those were the books that they were having kids read in school, because they're like, respectfully, I don't think I needed to read The Great Gatsby in high school. What did I learn from that? Like, truly. And I'm happy that there are other books that are in a young adult genre that are doing that, so that these young adults are able to actually absorb some like lessons and expand and grow through stories that are more interesting than The Great Gatsby. Again, respectfully.
Well, you're talking to a former English teacher, but just know that like no disrespect on that at all. I totally understand, especially given like for years, and we're still there, the standard syllabus is very, very monotonous in terms of like who's telling the stories and what the stories are about. And so what you're looking at is like, you pick different books based on craft, right? And like that is supposed to be the variation, but it also needs to be, diversity needs to come from perspective too. Like it needs to come from like the array of experiences that are being characterized. And I think it needs to come from different genres too. Like not all, like Gatsby, Catcher in the Rye, all of these were not considered classics when they first came out. Catcher in the Rye was a paperback and like at the time really hit, right? But now not quite as relevant, right? There's different stories being told now. And I think I agree with you. I think we should be moving towards like stories that are more representative of our world now, while still holding the truths of like, okay, this was a thing at one time too. Just like a full spectrum of what's available. I really like, did you ever read Nevo's, it's a vampire retelling of Gadsby. It is not YA, but it is quite dark, and I do think it would be right up your alley. I'm going to have to
It sounds right up my alley. We've known each other for 38 minutes, and you know what's up my alley.
I think I can't remember the title right now, but it's a vampire retelling. Sapphic follows Jordan Baker. And would highly recommend it. She's fabulous. Speculative too.
I'm in. Yeah, I think I even think now I want to reread some books that were considered classics when I was in high school. Like I would like to reread Catcher in the Rye actually is one of them, because it's my aunt and I have very similar taste in music and movies and stuff, and she loves Catcher in the Rye, and I just can't get over what I thought in high school, which was that Holden was just like whining about everything, and I was like, you just got to figure it out. Like, I just don't, why are we reading about this like young teenage boy who just like literally can't get a grip? And that's my recollection of it. And it just felt very like out of touch to read. And I'm 30, so I would have been reading this, I don't know, 15 years ago. So I can't imagine trying to read that book now with the exposure to everything that's going on in the world that these kids have. And they're reading about this kid who like is experiencing really a lot less of a traumatic young adult life or teenage life than most people in the world do. And to be able to take that seriously, I could barely take it seriously at 15. So I would want to be able to read it now and see if I feel any different. But
if you read it and love it, like what if it changes your life now?
Okay, if that happens, that's like a big plot point of my life. Like I'm gonna have to let go my disdain of Holden Caulfield. I don't know. I think I wouldn't tell you.
Well, the whole special episode just on that.
Just unpacking Holden Caulfield.
Yeah, it'll be formal apology. I'll have like a PA response or PR response, be like, I would like to formally apologize to all of the Catcher in the Rye stands. I've made a grave mistake.
I'd like to see a reinvention of Holden Caulfield, maybe. I know like that might be complicated from an intellectual property standpoint, but I'm just thinking about like, you know, where there's no sort of self-roasting necessarily in Catcher in the Rye, just of all the sort of toxic masculinity that it's steeped in. Like, what would it be like to read essentially a retelling of this, where we're aware of all of the tropes that are or like the reader can see it and the narrator can see it too. So I'd be interested, like if there are English teachers out here listening to this and they're teaching Catcher in the Rye through like a gender lens, that could be interesting, because it's like, all right, let's read this. It'll help us understand what teenage life used to be like. And let's contrast it with what's actually happening, because obviously like the challenges are significantly different. For Lilies, it felt really important to like acknowledge, just before any of the time loop stuff actually starts, acknowledge just what regular school life is like these days. So like the level of security, the amount of like just low-key anxiety at all times when it comes to things like lockdowns, gun culture, notifications on your phone, just every single headline coming throughout the morning. Like all of these things that just add to sort of the mental load for kids who have like, y'all remember going to school from like 8 to 3? It's exhausting. Like, imagine that.
It's
plus
a
your
long
smartphone.
day. Oh my God. I had a call this morning at 9 a.m. and I was like, this is hell. I was like, and I used to, which is big baby energy for me. Like I need to deal with that. But I had to be like, you know, ready and presentable at 9 a.m. And I was like, I was going to school. I think I was leaving my house at like 7:30 in the morning. And then you're getting home at like 3 o'clock, 3:30. That's a crazy long day. That's a crazy long day.
Yeah.
And to be like switching gears into different subjects and then the social aspects of it too. It's a lot. Have any of your students reached out to you? Like, are they reading the book?
Yeah, a couple. I had a couple of them show up at an event I did. I used to teach in New Orleans. So I did a meet and greet there, and I had a couple different students come through and say hi. And they're all, you know, they're adults now. And so like that that's cool. And it's also different for me because I'm like, I am used to interacting with you as a 17-year-old, but now you're like 27. Right. Like, what happened? Right. How am I the same age, but you're a decade older? So it's cool.
It's crazy. We're both 27 now.
I know. Yeah, the folks who have popped up have like coincidentally turned out to be writers. People who are studying creative writing or have published their own work. And like, for me, like, life made, like, okay, the decade I spent working in schools was for something, like it would, obviously, like I loved working with my students. They're fantastic. The structure of like traditional school was like very challenging for me as a student. It was very challenging for me as a teacher. And coming out the other side of that and seeing like, okay, here's all these people who I poured like years of my life into, and they're becoming artists and writers too. And like, they're reading my book. It's just been like, oh my gosh, the last couple of months have been incredible for that reason. Just like seeing sort of, I feel like I entered my own time loop, or just, I've been transported to the future suddenly. Yeah. And like, that's been amazing. Like getting to connect with readers in general has been amazing. This is my first novel. And so the fact that, like the internet opens you up to like every single person's opinion, but also like the people who like hold the book close to their hearts when they really don't have to, like they're not my mom. They don't know me, but they're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And like that's everything to me as a writer. And as a storyteller in general. Eric, have you had like similar experiences with this where
that's always like whenever I'm just struggling, which I don't like talking about struggling with writing in public, because it's like it seems like one of those things where people who like, there's a lot of people who work their entire lives to try and become published or to just get this. And it's like been a dream for me. And so I never want to talk bad about it, but we all have it. We have those moments of when you're working and it's exhausting and you feel like you're terrible at it and everything sucks. And then you get like one email from some kid in like Kansas and it's makes you cry because like you connect with this one person that you never would have before if you hadn't done all of that work that was shit before. And I think that's the exciting thing about being a writer, is just getting people who connect with you, because I feel like I think anytime I connect with an author and I'm reading something and it like hits me and I'm like, oh, I understand this author. I understand this person. I think that you are getting a piece of their heart, and it's the same for the author too. When you go and talk to an author and say, oh my God, your book changed my life. It made me feel like seen, and you're getting a little bit of their heart back. And I think that's like the best part of this entire thing.
That's incredible.
It's just getting that feedback.
One of my mentors said to me right before the book came out, she was like, just be aware that it's going to feel like a slow trickle at first, because it's not like your album just dropped, like the life of a book is much longer, and it takes people time to read. So when I was hearing from people within the first week, I was like, oh my gosh, like, thank you so much. Like, that was so quick. But then in addition to that, like the fact that it's out there and it stays out there, it's like, I saw that you just got nominated for the Lincoln Award, Eric. That's very exciting. And I'm like, how cool that this book is like floating out. Where is it? Indiana, right? Or Illinois? Yes. Illinois schools, because it's Abraham Lincoln. Right.
But then like when I got the email about it though, in my head I was like, oh, like for Nebraska, because I was just thinking like in Nebraska or something. So I was like, why would a state award be named after just like the capital of Kansas?
No.
Or Nebraska.
I get it though. I get it. I wasn't even thinking of like Nebraska, but that makes sense.
I know.
But like the fact that it's like, here it is just floating around Illinois schools and kids are loving it. And like, I don't know if you went to Illinois at any point to like promote the book, But
I forwarded the email to my publisher saying, hey guys, now's a great chance to send me out there.
That's right.
They probably won't, but still.
Yeah.
I mean, how badly do you really want to go to Illinois?
I would like to go to Chicago one day, but I'd have to do it before winter. Can't go in the winter.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Indoor cat, remember?
Yeah, indoor cat. I get it.
I mean, one of the things is just the fact that it's awesome that you, like, as a teacher, you were able to actually influence kids to go out and become artists. And now knowing that, just like you said with your book, like every book has a life, and kids who read your book, you are going to be influencing for as long as it is in print and as long as they even find copies that it's not in print.
Yeah.
That's every time I think about, like, if one of my books like suddenly goes out of print and I'm like, well, it's sad that no one will ever read it again, but somebody will. They'll find copies of it somewhere.
They definitely will. And now you can find so many things out of print just used online all the time. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I would definitely not take credit for like the students that I have had that are now out, like being, you know, whole human beings in their own right, like writers and artists. I am grateful that they, like, you know, have been as gracious to be like, thank you for being a part of my journey. And I'm like, thank you.
You don't have to take
You're
all the credit.
You're
there still.
Right. Yeah. I wouldn't want to take credit for that. But the reality is, like, something that's so incredible about stories is like, it really just showcases how every human being, regardless of like how annoying or horrible they are, per the conversation we were having earlier about like the horrible things that are said by some of the Republicans in your book. Yeah. It's like everybody is creative. Everybody has their own spark. Everybody has something that they can offer. And it's just a question of, is the world going to give you permission to go there? And are you going to give yourself permission to go there? And I think, like, for me, as I love teaching, and part of my teaching life was me not giving myself permission to be creative, you know, because I was just working, or, you know, I was being creative and planning lessons. But like, I was not able to keep a sustainable writing practice as a teacher. I think some of that was like just straight up self-doubt, you know. I think the book has been really helpful for me because it's like a proof point of like, oh yeah, okay, like I am an artist. I know how to do this. I can do it again. And something I keep hearing from authors is like, you have to keep reminding yourself that every time you publish a new one. Kind of going through that right now with like working on new manuscripts that are on sub. And I'm like, oh, do I remember how to do this? And the answer is yes, but it just, you know, it takes time. And I find that when I come back to stories that remind me that like everybody goes through this, that everybody has reasons they don't give themselves permission to do things, and you just have to get past it and like understand that, like, you know, sometimes that's just your own crap and you just have to offload it. That's always helpful for me. And that's kind of what Lilies is about. It's about like understanding where your crap comes from. It's from, spoiler alert, it's from your parents. But like, understanding where your own crap comes from, and then just like, once you can identify it, you can set that aside and think about things more expansively for yourself and for other people too.
Yeah.
I was going to say, is there something, when you sat down to start writing the Lilies, was there something that kind of connected with you when you were thinking, oh, that's the idea, that's the one that I should write next, that's what I should work on?
Oh, when I was starting writing the book, or yeah. So
like when I'm not sure how you like get ideas. Like authors are all different, where our ideas come from. But for me, I usually will get an idea and then kind of file it away. And then there are some ideas, like I'll go, if I'm not sure what I'm going to write next, I'll go to the nice spreadsheet of ideas and just kind of like see which one's talking to me. But there are some ideas where even if I'm in the middle of the project, I will all of a sudden go, oh no, that's the one I need to focus on right now. And I drop everything and start writing it. Like, did you kind of have that? Or was it one of those things where you kind of put it away and then kind of like picked at it a little bit through the years, where you like added things as you went along?
That's a great question. It was a much more condensed project than that. I had written 2 novels over the course of my time in my MFA. And like both of them were like things that I was slowly picking at over time. I now see those 2 novels as like they were training wheels projects, you know, like I'm still scrapping them for parts. And like, that's cool. I'm good with that. For Lilies, it was actually like a collaborative process in how it got developed. I had graduated from my MFA. My thesis advisor was Danielle Clayton, author of The Bells. And she's amazing. She's also the former CEO, now board chair of We Need Diverse Books. And she runs these media companies that are focused on just like injecting the young adult and children's market with diverse stories. And she came to me and she was like, I think you should write about this thing. And I was like, I have some. And so what she was interested in was like a girls' school environment with a gender diversity lens. And she's like, you would be really good for this. And I'll help you like in terms of like editing process, and we'll launch you. And I was like, okay, sign me up. And so basically like the initial conversation I had with her about this like core idea of, what Archwell Academy could be, and the notion that like, it is a women's institution that's upholding patriarchy and like causing repeating patterns, much like the time loop repeats. That just got more and more resonant the more we talked about it. So like that initial process was like super collaborative, and like we already had a working rapport because she had been, helping me revise or like feedbacking all of my thesis work for like almost a year at that point. So also as we were having these conversations, Bell Hooks passed like right in the middle of it. She was like an amazing feminist thinker, really influential for me as an undergrad, and like continues to be influential for me in how I think about gender related stuff. And so it just felt like getting onto the topic of this particular setting, this setting that is meant to be elite. It's an elite school, but that's just code for exclusionary. And like, how does that apply not just to gender stuff, but to race and class and all these things? Like, I am a themes writer. I get really like, that's what makes me chew on a bone, like, and so, I think once that fuse was lit, I was like, all right, I'm writing. And I think between, I started in December of 2021, I guess. No, 2022. No, it was December 2021. And I was done with the first section, ready to take it on sub by like, March, April. And wow. Yeah. And like, but that was really just for like the first 100 pages it went on sub as a partial. And, Danielle helped me get in the back door within that way. Cause a lot of the time you have to write multiple complete drafts if you are a debut novelist. And I think because I had her mentorship and just like her voice, like supporting me, I really want to make sure, I know I'm talking about her a lot, but like credit where credit is due. Like she's an amazing mentor, author, and she is like secretly like puppet mastering the children's book community, like from behind the scenes in a way that I'm like, thank you for like reverse engineering how like this very weird gatekeepy sometimes space is. And so, the book wouldn't be what it is without Danielle. That's awesome. And like, I think because I had somebody to talk to about it, I was like, all right, I'm working, I like had quick deadlines like for myself, but it's like, okay, I'm just going to do as much as I can. I find that if I'm toiling away on something and I don't have like a revision partner, or I don't have somebody who's going to just like, who has agreed to look at it, then it's just going to stay like, it's a document, it's closed. I haven't opened it in 3 months, Yeah. Do you find the same thing where like if you don't have an accountability buddy or something, it just doesn't move forward?
It depends. Sometimes, yes. Sometimes I am so invested in the story that it's like I'm my own accountability buddy, because I'm like, I need to find out what happens next. But it's like, again, that's only when I have something that I'm writing towards. So like like if I have an outline and I know where the story is going to go and it's not going to change or divert from that at all, then I'm just like, oh, I'll just write out a little bit and then it'll just kind of fizzle off. And one day I won't go back to it and get a new idea and start working on that instead. I have like probably 15 unfinished manuscripts on my computer. I have like 5 finished ones maybe, but I think several of them will never see the light of day ever. Like you said, I'm just kind of using that to pull parts from every once in a while.
Yeah.
Although that does come back to bite me sometimes when I'm like, did I already say this before? I have to like look it up. I have to like try different words in all of my books that I've published to be like, did I already type that out? Have I said this? I don't want to sound like I'm repeating myself.
Yeah. I've had to start it. I'm at a point where I'm paused, but I'm like halfway through 2 different manuscripts, and I'm having to now go back and search for phrases that I'm just like, did I use this already in Lilies? Because I don't want to use the same phrase, but you tend to speak in similar patterns, and so you'll write in similar patterns too. And it's just like it's a voice thing. You have to like you want to keep your author voice, but at the same time, your characters need their own unique thing. And so for me, it like the Command F insert phrase to find things has been really, really helpful. Again, another reason why I would not make it as a novelist pre-computer,
Pre-computer, yeah. I feel like though there's something about like if I were a really big fan of an author and I found this like one phrase that this author uses over and over again across many books, it would break the fourth wall in a way that I would kind of be like, now I feel like we're friends. Now I know a little bit about you and you love that phrase, and I would personally treat it like a little Easter egg that I would love. But yeah, I understand why that would be stressful as someone who's trying to write separate stories for separate characters and wanting to keep it all with their own.
I mean, there are Easter eggs that I'll put into all of my books to kind of connect them a little bit, just a tiny bit. So
I did not know that.
I like doing it, and I think it's fun.
Can you spoil what some of them are?
I kept what's it called? I kept Lose You to Find Me, my second book, separate because I didn't want the future of this book to basically be like, oh, by the way, this also takes place in the world that all that's left in the world is. So all of these kids are probably going to die in a couple of years. So I very much set it apart on purpose, but I kind of want to some other things I'm working on. I kind of want to pull characters from and just kind of tease in the background and just kind of bring it up. And then there's other ideas that I'm working on where I'm thinking about making it take place in the all that's left in the world universe, but 100 years in the future. So it's all of this stuff doesn't matter anymore kind of thing.
That is
just little Easter eggs. I like shared universes. I think that's fun when you're kind of a constant reader where you're kind of picking up on things where the author's leaving it there for you to find. I like that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's really rewarding and unique to, well, I don't want to say unique to young adult literature, but I think it happens more in genre fiction in general. Going back to the conversation about traditional English syllabuses, you don't usually see that in what's considered canon literature. And I feel like you should, it's because it's an engaging thing. It's again, like you said, it's like you're getting to know the author a little bit. You're getting to know their broader world. And it's rewarding for people who are coming back to your books again and again. I was thinking about the All That's Left in the World this morning, 100 years in the future, Eric, because my thesis manuscript was set in South Louisiana, probably 100 years in the future from the setting that you laid out. Yeah, it was 100 years in the future after the collapse, but magic involved.
Ooh.
And but that's another one I'm scrapping for parts. But I think there's something there though. There's something there because it's there's just so much potential there. And I think, some people are that sounds scary. What's happening if South Louisiana is completely underwater and we are, living in a scenario where all of our power is just on individual solar panels and batteries. And I'm like, well, what else is going on? Because there's probably a lot else. Think about 100 years in the past. Like, they couldn't imagine the smartphone. So just the thought of what would be at play. That's what led me into the magic angle for it, because it's like, you know, we're in 2024. In 1924, a smartphone would be magic, right? So it's just like, I just like to think about it from that standpoint. But also, you know, I like writing sci-fi, and I don't like getting way too technical because I find it slows me down a lot.
Yeah. I'm the same way. It's like light sci-fi.
Yes.
I don't like the
Light
heavy
sci-fi.
stuff. I like it based in this universe, and then I can just kind of add on top of that.
Correct. Yes, agree.
So before I let you go, Quinn, what are you reading? We like to ask all of our authors what they're reading right now.
Well, I'm reading a couple things. I am reading Post-Colonial Love Poems by Natalie Diaz. Sounds real light. It's poetry. So it is light in that sense. But, you know, I'm like being very sort of 19th century about it, like waking up at 5 a.m., lighting a candle and reading some poems. It's like I'm really vibing with myself.
I love that.
Love
that.
And then the other thing I'm reading is it's like manga from the 1960s. It's
fun.
It's called Nono Ba by Shigeru Mizuki. And he is like a really interesting illustrator, storyteller. And this is sort of a memoir about how he learned about ghosts through his like family's friend who was like an elder mentor to him. And so it's like kind of connected to Buddhism, kind of connected to Shintoism. And like, it sounds like it's not light, but it really is, because it's an illustrated memoir. And so, yeah, I'm like getting into some heavy poetry and some really light spiritualism, you know? And so
I love it.
Love that.
Yeah, just magic all around over here.
I love it. I love it.
Quinn, thank you so much for coming. It was great talking with you.
You too.
I hope you had a good time.
Of course. Thank you all so much.
I mean, and everybody can buy the Lilies anywhere you buy books. And where can they find you online? Are you on Instagram?
I sure am.
You're on Instagram. But what's your Instagram?
It's as in YA _Quinn _ Ya Quinn Ya on Instagram. And
my God, I love it.
Thank you. And then my website is thisisquinswebsite.com. Hard to remember, but you know.
I saw that. That's hilarious.
Easier than my last name for people, so I just went for it, you know? I just went for it.
I love it.
Thank y'all for
That's
having me.
I love
Well,
it.
thank you for coming.
Thank
this
you
is
for
great.
coming.
I hope you had a good time.
When she asks me how far we can take it, I tell her we can take it across the entire universe. You are my universe, not just a planet.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of YAOK, and thank you to Quinn for coming on to chat with us. We hope that you all check out their book, The Lilies, and let's also not forget that Eric J. Brown has a new book that's out too, and so you should be checking that out as well. And you can find us on YAOK Podcast on Instagram. So come say hi to us there. Tell us what you're reading. And Eric, what are you reading today?
I'm doing a lot of reading because I am actually moderating a panel in July for the Columbus Book Festival in Ohio.
Okay.
And so I am reading Find Him Where You Left Him Dead by Kristen Simmons.
Oh my.
It is like a Japanese folklore-based Jumanji thriller, which, I mean, that's like
I like all of the words you're
90%
saying.
I'm very excited for it. Thin Air by Kelly M. Parker. It's 8 hours, 12 contestants, one flight. Not everyone will survive.
Okay.
And Invisible Sun by Kim Johnson. And it's a kind of mystery suspense. It's It's about a kid who is wrongfully accused of a crime, and it is happening right around COVID-19. Kind of shuts everything down as well.
Ooh.
What's it called? The panel that I'm doing is the title of it is "The Kids Are Not Okay," and it's all about dark themes in YA. So
Okay.
I'm excited to read them, and I'm excited to talk with all of these authors. If you're in the Columbus area and want to come by on July, I believe it is 13th and 14th, I will be there. It's that weekend in July, so whenever that is. Alyssa, what are you reading?
That's exciting. I am finishing a book called The Housemaid. I was on a flight and I read through my physical book and then I had my Kindle. So I was like, I'm going to see what I already have downloaded. And The Housemaid I had downloaded. So I've been like burning through it and I'm so excited because the next book I'm going to read is The Only Light Left Burning. And I can't wait.
But I'm like, I hate it.
There's no way I'm going to hate it, first of all. And I feel like I've made it like so ceremonious, the beginning of me starting this book, that I'm like, I feel like I need to like send a text blast to all my family and friends and be like, I'm starting my friend's second book if you care. Like, if you even care.
That you need to start it at 5 a.m. by candlelight and make sure you have the sleep nap one too.
Okay, send us a DM and let us know what you're reading. Tell us why it is The Only Light Left Burning by R.J. Brown and how much you love it. And we hope you join us next time.
Bye.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.